Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Arden, and today we're reviewing DCeased Dead Planet number 4. So we've been reviewing this series as it's been coming out, and I have been consistently enjoying it. We just reviewed the latest issue of Marvel Zombies Resurrection, and I was comparing this series a lot to it, and this one favorably. In part because Tom Taylor is really able to construct a story where you feel engaged and you have a sense of stakes with these characters, even though you know, like, this is very much just like an Elseworld story, and any of these characters can die without there really being lasting consequences. So, like the rest of this series, I enjoyed this particular book and would recommend it. It does feel like we go an extra level in this particular book, and I don't know. I really felt like we reached a whole other new, I guess there's no other word, but level for danger in terms of the stakes being risen and a new threat emerging at the end of this book. Tom Taylor is a huge part of that, and the way he writes things is interesting because we talked a little bit about how, like, there can be these random deaths in Marvel Zombie Resurrection. I don't really feel anything, but Taylor, I think, is able to evoke cues from the main continuity enough that you really do feel deaths, changes, and new sources of danger in his books. Trevor Hairsine does the pencils, Gigi Baldessani does the inks, and Rain Barreto does the coloring. I believe that's the same creative team that's been with us this whole time, and they do a really good job at working with Taylor's ideas and just conveying those ideas effectively. It really isn't much more than that, but that's all you need with something this bold and fun. It very much reads like Injustice, where Tom Taylor is playing up his strengths of being able to just take a what should be a simple idea, like a tie-in to a video game comic or DC's version of zombies, and making it something special and fun and worth reading. So, let's get into what this book's about. We open on pretty much where we left off. We got some heroes returning from the Second Garden. Mr. Miracle is now on the scene and willing to help out. Constantine wants to go with him to New Genesis along with the team to do something. But I forget what their plan is exactly. They need, oh yes, they need Metron's chair so that they can figure out more about this supposed cure to the anti-life equation that has infected the Earth. I remember now. In the meantime, Mary Marvel, I don't really know what else they would call her right now, but her and John Kent, Superman, go out and find Black Canary, who currently has a zombified Oliver Queen contained in a barrier. She, who, from her perspective, like, John could have been dead by her actions earlier. So she's very happy to see that Clark's son is alive and well. And they explain to her that there's a potential cure, but like, they need her help. And she says, "Well, I can't leave, like, Oliver like this, even though he's undead." But I forget how they resolve that. What happened? Oh yeah, so she agrees to come with them so long as Doctor Fate can keep Green Arrow protected, because Ivy wouldn't let her into the garden. Sorry, it's been a little while since I've read this now. Anyways, Mr. Miracle, Superman, I guess, Mary Marvel, and Green Lantern all go to New Genesis to try and get to the chair. Mr. Miracle has a great scene with Orion that kind of calls back to his solo series by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. It's a real fun moment where Orion just keeps knocking scot-free to the ground and ordering him to stand back up. And eventually, John Kent interferes and knocks Orion down. and takes him down to punch and just says, stand down. Highfather comes along and is like, oh, I see my boys are getting along about as much as usual. And he's pretty courteous to the visiting heroes. And he even agrees to call to Metron, but he says, like, that guy doesn't listen to me. Which is consistently true with their history. And he's like, I can't promise that he'll cooperate or anything like that. But he agrees to help out. But he does talk to his son, Scott Free, and he's like, like, we've been doing our best to raise your son, but he could really use his father. And Scott it talks about how, like, losing Barda made him, like, he didn't feel like he could possibly raise his child. But then he's like, I don't know. Like, it seems pretty crazy to leave him in, like, do you really want me to be his main influence, or Orion, or Light Ray? Which Scott readily agrees is something that he doesn't want. It's a real nice father-son conversation, basically talking about, like, Highfather's grandson. So it's very familial in spite of these being very otherworldly beings. And Scott decides, well, I'm going to bring back his mother. And Highfather says, well, whatever happens, you should come back anyways and raise your son. So then they go to the torn up remains of Apocalypse that were destroyed after Cyclops was infected. They managed to call Metron, and he comes racing over, and he's like, oh, Highfather said you wanted something for me. And he's like, here, this little Earth relic thing will help you see the future. And he's like, oh, that's actually helpful because I need, there's a future I need to see. So he kind of agrees to accept it. But then they are able to kind of seize Metron and pull him off of the chair for a moment. Metron is not happy and starts to fight back, and is even able to, like, break through this little handcuff thing that Mr. Miracle made that's supposed to be unbreakable. He's, like, turning giant, grabbing the other characters and knocking them around. But eventually he gets back to, like, onto his chair and takes off. Superman chases off after him, and John explains, like, please, like, we just need your chair. Earth is being consumed by the anti-life equation and we need to fix it. Ryan's like, I don't care about that. Oh, hey, thanks, AJ Borkar. That's really kind of you. He said, no special message, thanks for reviewing comics, cheers. He donated $5. That's really awesome, dude. That you are officially our first super chat person, because we don't usually do a lot of that, so I really appreciate it. And Tevye Smoka, thanks for joining us in chat too. Anyhow, Superman is like, Earth is being consumed, Orion doesn't care, which I would say is very in character for Orion. All this stuff with the New Gods is really written well, and written by someone who clearly, like, understands this stuff and has even read, like, more recent stuff like the Tom King series. And I appreciate those little details. That's part of what I was saying about how Tevye is able to, like, evoke these feelings and in these characters, so you care about them, even though technically, like, we've never seen this version of Metron before. It's just clearly Metron that we know from other stuff. Tevye says, John punching Orion in the face was really funny. It was funny, but I also like that moment. It's a cool callback. Sometimes a callback can feel really cheap or something like that, but something that's relatively obscure and only, like, people who have specifically read that Mr. Miracle series, I think, are going to appreciate this little moment that actually happens to be flashing by on the screen right now. But I like those details, and they add a little something to the character, like I was saying, and I think really is important to where this series and DCeased in general works to a degree that Marvel Zombies doesn't. I don't want to be hating too much on Marvel Zombies. It's just DCeased comes across as stronger because Taylor is able to do things like this and make these characters feel a little more real, a little more truer to their normal selves, where it feels like I care about what happens to this universe and these characters, especially because it's got, like, a new version of Superman where, like, it makes sense. It's his son. Like, that man died, and well, not died. He's in the actual literal soul star right now, but and I keep waiting for that shoe to drop. But I do I think having that and Damian Wayne becoming Batman kind of gives this story an interesting edge too, where it's like, oh, like we know these characters, but they're doing different things. And adding to that with Green Lantern, who I just love her design and think she's such a cool character. That's like a Spider-Gwen level character, if you ask me. Okay, so Mary's like, hey, you're supposed to be one of the most intelligent beings in the universe. Like, what happens if we fail to contain the anti-life equation? And Metron's like, well, why didn't you start with that instead of ambushing me? And he's like, and I still really want to see the future with your device. So, all right, you guys have a deal. And he lets Cyborg sit down in the chair. Cyborg is immediately exposed to far too much information. And he says some interesting things. He's like, oh, I know too much about the gods, about the war against existence to come. And Wonder Woman's like, okay, maybe let's try and focus on one catastrophe at the time. And Mary's like, do you have the cure? And he's like, I do. I need to recode my blood. The life equation exists within that, which is kind of something we already knew. That's something the anti-life equation actually told Cyborg or something from before. Superman's like, thanks, Metron. But he's like, oh, okay, no problem, but I gotta go right now. I can't be here. And he just takes off. And the other heroes are like, okay. He took one look at the future and like panicked. That's not a good sign. Maybe we should go too, which I think is the right decision. And sure enough, after they leave, the Black Racer, so again, another little detail of New God stuff kind of creeping in here, witnesses what is the only one left to witness what happens next. And a part of Apocalypse's remains begins to break up, and it cracks open, and death itself utters only two words: Darkseid isn't. And the anti-life version of the anti-life version of Darkseid emerges. A new Genesis Highfather immediately senses what happens, and he can feel his brother being unborn, in the words of the narration. He orders, I want to say Ambush Bug, but that's not right. I forget what his name is. But he orders one of the New Gods to go and take Mr. Miracle's son and get the hell out of here. But by the time they can do anything else, it's too late. And the unliving Darkseid has already attacked New Genesis and has Orion pinned to the ground. And that's how this book ends. And that's what I was talking about. Like, there's a major kicker of a twist at the end of this book, where it's like, oh damn, like, there's now an undead Darkseid, and he probably is going of New Genesis, so there's just going to be a world of undead new gods, which I think is kind of what Cyborg sensed. So when he's saying there's a war for all existence, like, yeah, this anti-life business is no longer contained on Earth, and it has consumed like some of the most powerful beings in existence. So it's a hell of an ending. Sorry, I dropped the book. There's still 3 more books left in this miniseries, and I think we got a sense of what those books are going to be about. And like, oh damn, that's a way to really bring the second half of your series like into a like, oh, we're just kind of getting started sort of thing. And in 3 issues, there should be plenty of time, especially the way Taylor tends to budget out like his books in terms of like structure in his stories. He should be able to cover a lot of ground in that time and maybe have some fun with this. Plus, this isn't necessarily the end of DCeased. I don't know how this book is selling, but if it's doing well, I'm sure they will absolutely want to try out something else or something more, and it feels like there's plenty of room for more. He's already done 4 series of varying lengths out of DCeased at this point, and they're all pretty damn good. Tevez said a couple of things. He was so happy they acknowledged John Kent's Superboy being stronger than his dad. That kind of gets into what I was saying about Tom Taylor having these little details and stuff, and it's kind of cool. I didn't know Superboy or John Kent, so Superman in this world, could outrun Metron. That's a little interesting. that kind of gets into what Tevye was saying there. Like he's powerful. He's not just like ordinary Superman. It'll be cool to see where all this is paying off. I still think Clark Kent will return at some point and not living. That they've teased that early on in Dead Planet, and like I said, that's just like a little knife dangling over the series. I didn't think the Darkseid thing was going to happen, but I did feel like at the very beginning of all of this, back at the first DCeased book, they really did just sort of wipe away Apocalypse really quickly there. So I was pleased to see it come back, and I was like, oh, damn. We're really getting into something. Tevye says, also, I agree, Mary Marvel taking on the Metron is, or talking to Metron is really awesome. Mary Marvel being a part of this book is great. She doesn't get a lot of focus, and any like story like this where we can kind of focus in on little characters like this. I haven't talked about her much either, but Cassie Sandsmark becoming Wonder Woman is cool and gets into what I was saying about it. Like we get to focus in on these, we'll say lesser characters, but I mean is like characters that DC typically pays less attention to, and they're just like the focus of this story. I don't, like I was saying Superman might return, but I expect him to return as an enemy. I don't necessarily want those characters to come back if they can be cured. Maybe like Wonder Woman would be a fun moment or something, but I just like having a different cast. And maybe Earth is just doomed. And they're all just going to be something else entirely. Now, oh, okay. Tevye is saying, indeed, speaking of DCeased, any opinion on Hope at World's End? Because I think that series is fantastic. I agree, I really like it. I can't comment on like its latest goings on though. I don't know what issue I'm on, but I don't think I'm fully caught up. I tend to read the digital books at my own pace, and I have a bunch of them. Probably some that I haven't read in my library, although I usually am pretty quick to read them once I get around to buying them. But I would totally also recommend the other DCeased books. The first DC series, I would say, is the weakest out of all of them, actually. But really, it's just set up for the rest of the series, so I wouldn't recommend you check that out. Then we have like a relatively short but fun little series called The Unkillables, which is a lot of fun. Hope at World's End, I believe, has been a digital first series, but that's also been really good and kind of showing little snippets of the fall of Earth as it goes along. And then we have this, which has been great and kind of continues the story in a way that I didn't think they were going to do. And that's why I was a little cold on the original DC story, because I was just like, oh, I don't know, it's a pretty standard like zombie superhero thing. We had kind of seen something like that play out in Marvel Zombies. What I didn't know was it was really setting up a series of other comics about a totally different world. And the dynamic that almost reminds me of what they were doing in New 52 with Earth 2, but you know, just different with this whole zombie angle that kind of adds a whole dynamic of fun and a very different atmosphere compared to what they were doing with Earth 2. Tevye says, because we have Darkseid, Trigon, and Zombie Superman, because, oh boy, that's going to be a huge bloodbath. In response to what I was saying earlier. He's not Trigon. I did double check. He is just a full anti-life consumed version of Darkseid, and probably just a zombie in that sense like any others, just with all the powers of Darkseid. And those anti-life zombies are smarter than they let on. There's a certain hive mind going on there that they don't always show off, but it's very much there. Tevye is saying, I agree, Cassie Sandsmark becoming Wonder Woman is fantastic, and even Cassandra Cain becoming Batgirl makes me so happy. Yeah, I mean, that's not new for Cassandra Cain, but like I said, it gets into, like, we get to focus on some fun characters here. Bucket Think Tank, thanks for joining us. You were saying, I couldn't really get into DCeased. There were some great ideas, but nothing really sold me. Probably will get in the trades, though. Well, that kind of gets into what I was saying, though, about, like, I was pretty cool on it at first until I realized, oh, like we're doing something with this undead world. Like the Trinity got knocked down and all these things happened for a reason. And I really like all of that now that I understand what they were going for. Because I think the first DC series is all just kind of about setting that up for a series of other books, and if so, it's fun. Oh right, Tevye says I can understand. I guess what I was saying, but honestly, I think DCeased does Marvel Zombies 10 times better. Well, I mean, I mostly agree with you based on what I was saying earlier. But Tevye also brings up the Amazo army. I forgot about that, but that was brought up in issue 3 of this book. And that's a whole other threat out there. This army of Amazo robots controlled by villains, hunkered down in Australia and also ready for war. So there's a lot of danger in the air. But those villains, they everyone's united against the anti-living, so they might not all be entirely just a threat. They might also just get decimated by like Darkseid or something too. So we'll have to see. Tevye says, speaking DC, that reminds me, any opinion on future state? Because my expectations are mixed at best. Future state? I haven't heard of that. I have heard of the wintery thing they're doing in December, and I've ordered a bunch of those books. That looks cool. If there's something beyond that, I haven't heard about it yet, and I'll have to look into it. Mr. DC Comics, thanks for joining us. He says, Tom Taylor is a great writer. His Suicide Squad book is good too. I think I read like one issue of Suicide Squad, and I liked it, and then didn't really get around to following up on it. So I will have to check that out too. I haven't heard anyone complain about it in chat, but I keep getting warnings from YouTube and actually my streamer too that I am getting a relatively slow bitrate. Oh, and even I'm seeing it. So you might be getting some weird lag if you're watching it live. I apologize for that, but we streamed earlier and it was fine. So, and it's all gone now. So maybe everything's fine. Tevye saying, I love Tom Taylor's Suicide Squad is fantastic. I really like Tom Taylor in general. I think as one of DC's main writers, he's one of their strongest assets because he always delivers consistently fun content. He's wildly creative and loves like the DC brand and bringing up little details from comics new and old, and everything he does is great. And I said DC, but he also had a great Wolverine run. And I really like his take on Laura Kinney. He's a strong writer, and I've complained before about DC kind of relying on the same writers over and over again. Tom Taylor's one I don't feel that way on. Tinian and what's the other guy? Tomasi are like the 3 that I tend to consistently like at DC, but I would love to see them start to rely on more new talent and some less so of like the other people, like maybe less Williamson, less Bendis, and less Tom King. I think Scott Snyder wants to kind of take a step back anyways, but even less of him. And let's kind of diversify it. But when I say I want to see new talent in the mix and kind of them diversifying the brand, I never really mean Tom Taylor. He's always consistently fun, and he's a selling point usually for his books. Never really got into that Seven Secrets book that he's doing with Boom Studios, but his stuff with DC and Marvel has been really fun. Okay, I'll have to look into Future State based on what you're saying in chat there, Tevye. DC Comics, Mr. DC Comics was saying, I really hate how they skipped showing Superman as a father to Jonathan Kent. They skipped over it and just aged him out. Yes, you and Tevye and me, really, are all not fans of that decision, which seems almost entirely to rest around Bendis. It makes sense in DCeased. I've never heard anyone complain about that because you're telling a different story and you're going in a different direction there. But when it comes to the main continuity, that was a terrible idea. And yeah, Tevye is quick to agree with you. I knew you were going to, not to complain or anything. It's just oh yeah, no, I'm with you guys there. It is a disaster. But yeah. But this book kind of shows the strength of we can do an Elseworlds story with younger John Kent, and it is fun. An adult John Kent in an Elseworlds story is a lot of fun. That whole angle with Superboy, the thing about that is They could have just had teenage Superboy show up in a Legion of Superheroes comic, and it to like takes place in John Kent's theoretical future, and young John Kent could still exist in present day without that not making sense whatsoever. Like that makes perfect sense to me, right? Because like Legion of Superheroes would take place out of the timeline anyways, so who cares? So I like it was all for nothing, and we've talked a lot about my problems with Bendis and Superman, but it is frustrating, and I don't think it's irrelevant to bring it up because John Kent is the star of this book, and he's so fun, even like totally different and even more aged up here. It just shows like you can do different things, but like I said, it makes sense in DC's to do that. If they were going to age up everyone in DC, I would be against like their main continuity. I'd be against that in theory, but that was also a 5G idea that they abandoned. So I was never against that idea for that reason. It would have been cool to have like a next generation of an adult Damian Wayne and John Kent, but also being able to have a bunch of comics published in an era where those two are kids and Batman and Superman are as we know them. Like, what was the issue with that? Why did we run away from that idea in 5G? Because the other thing about it is it also could have done, well, there's other eras, like back in the Justice Society, and there would maybe be like an era for Barry Allen and an era for Wally West. But okay, we don't need to talk about all of that now. So let's maybe end things there, but I do want to give an extra special thank you to AJ Borkar. That was an awesome little surprise for me, so I appreciate it. Tevia, DC Comics, Bucket Think Tank. It's always great to hear from you guys. And we'll have more streams and content coming up throughout this week. I've changed things up ever so slightly, and I'm sure you guys have kind of noticed, but I've found a way to kind of balance these streams out a little better with regular content because the streams were taking up more and more time to an unacceptable level. I never wanted these streams to eat into my time with making regular videos, so I've kind of found a way to compromise. And that's how a book that came out like a week or two ago can be reviewed now. But it lets us kind of do some stuff with streams and sort of separate them out a little bit. So I think we'll leave it there because Tevia's pretty much just echoing what I was just saying before in chat. And yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you next time. I do have plans for tomorrow for more streams and hopefully a whole other video. But we'll leave the identity of that a surprise for now. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys next time here on Comic Island. Although I say that video won't be done tomorrow. So maybe that'll be on Friday. But yeah, have a good one, guys. And yeah, that was a fun stream. See you guys next time.